Hi everyone, my name is Fabian from Portuguese history class, and on this occasion, I would like to talk about Ibn Rushd, otherwise known as Averroes. Ibn Rushd, known in the West as Averroes, was a Muslim polymath who mastered a number of different fields. He wrote over 100 books on such varied topics as theology, physics, metaphysics, linguistics, medicine, astronomy, and law, just to mention a few. He was born in Cordoba in what is now Spain in the year 1126, and his full name was Abdul Walid Muhammad. Ibn Rushd came from a family of renowned scholars and jurists of the Maliki school of law, which was the predominant school in that region at the time. And he would himself follow in their footsteps as just one aspect of his varied intellectual life. He seems to have received a wide education in both the religious sciences, being taught by some of his family members and friends, as well as being highly educated and learned in the philosophical and scientific subjects as well. At some point between 1153 and 1169, Ibn Rushd was in Marrakesh, present-day Morocco. There he met Ibn Tufail, a renowned philosopher, who then introduced Ibn Rushd to Abu Yaqub, the Caliph of the Almohad dynasty, which was the ruling dynasty at the time in Andalusia and North Africa, who himself, a keen student of philosophy, frightened Ibn Rushd with a question concerning whether the heavens were created or not. The Caliph answered the question himself, put Ibn Rushd at ease, and sent him away with precious gift, after a long conversation that proved decisive for Ibn Rushd's career. Soon afterward, Ibn Rushd received the ruler's request to provide a badly needed correct interpretation of the philosophy of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, a task to which he devoted many years of his busy life as judge, beginning at Seville and continuing at Cordoba. This moment could be seen as the start of Ibn Rushd's very privileged career as a judge, beginning at Sevilla and continuing at Cordoba. Between 1169 and 1195, Ibn Rushd wrote a series of commentaries on most of Aristotle's works, such as the Organon, De Anima, Physica, Metaphysica, De Partibus Animalium, Parva Naturalia, Meteorologica, Rhetorica Poetica, and the Nicomachean Ethics. He wrote summaries and middle and long commentaries, often two or all three kinds of the same work. Aristotle's Politica was inaccessible to Ibn Rushd, therefore he wrote a commentary on Plato's Republic, which is both a paraphrase and a middle commentary in form. All of Averroes' commentaries are incorporated in the Latin version of Aristotle's complete works. They are extant in the Arabic original or Hebrew translations, or both, and some of these translations serve in the place of the presumably lost Arabic originals, such as the important commentaries on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and on Plato's Republic. Ibn Rushd's commentaries exerted considerable influence on Jews and Christians in the following centuries. His clear, penetrating mind enabled him to present completely Aristotle's thought and to add considerably to its understanding. It was these extensive commentaries on Aristotle which led him to earn the nickname the Commentator in the West. Principally, his Aristotelian commentaries sought to cleanse the Islamic philosophical corpus from Neoplatonist emanationist views, such as the ones held by his predecessors, Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi, and to separate pure philosophy from theological arguments by Al-Farabi and Avicenna, among others. The end goal of his intellectual endeavor is to recover what he calls pure Aristotelian thought. Ibn Rushd has also developed many original philosophical concepts through his treatment of Aristotle's work. These concepts are, of course, peripatetic or Aristotelian by nature, emphasizing experience and empirical data. Also, just like Aristotle, the general character of Ibn Rushd's philosophy is illuminated by his overreaching picture of logic. Most broadly, he understands it as the study of the conditions and rules that rightly guide the mind towards its conception, or tasawwur, of essence, and the assent, or tasdik, to propositions. Glossing Aristotle's famous remarks that it is the mark of the educated person to seek the appropriate level of precision in any inquiry, Ibn Rushd clarifies that the educated person is one who has been instructed in the art of logic. These central Aristotelian characteristics can be seen throughout all of Ibn Rushd's philosophy, For example, in regards to society, Ibn Rushd sees it as basically being divided into three classes: the philosophers, the theologians, and the masses, with the philosophers acting as the elite due to their mastery of Aristotelian logic, which he sees as being important for cultivating virtue within society. One other interesting aspect of Ibn Rushd's philosophy is his conception of faith, religious faith in its relation to reason. He, unlike many at that time, conceptualized faith as something that is not opposed but complementary to reason. This conception is based on the philosophical assumption held by Ibn Rushd that faith and reason are two different methods by which we can arrive at the same truth, that is, the divine truth. This implies a perfectly harmonious relationship between philosophy and religion within Ibn Rushd's thought. In 1184, Caliph Abu Yaqub died and was succeeded by Abu Yusuf Yaqub. Initially, Ibn Rushd remained in royal favor, but in 1195, his fortune reversed. Various charges were made against him and he was tried by a tribunal in Cordoba. The tribunal condemned his teachings, ordered the burning of his books, and banished Ibn Rushd to nearby Lucena. Early biographers' reasons for his fall from grace include the possible insult to the caliph in his writings, but modern scholars attribute it to political reasons. After a few years, Ibn Rushd returned to the court in Marrakesh and was again in the caliph's favor. He died shortly afterwards on 11 September 1196, or 9 Safar 595 in the Islamic calendar. He was initially buried in North Africa, but his body was later moved to Cordoba for another funeral. Ibn Rushd is often described as a philosopher who failed to attract the attention of his first audience, resulting in the death of his philosophy at the hands of its intended Islamic readers, a state of affairs that is said to have continued until its revival in the ideological debates of the Arab Renaissance or Nahda. To be sure, Ibn Rushd's influence in Muslim contexts cannot compare to the overwhelming influence of Ibn Sina, nor even to Ibn Rushd's own influence in Europe. Still, the commonly heard claim that he has no influence on Islamic thought is false. First, recent scholarship has shown that Ibn Rushd had successors. Bin Sharifa identifies 39 direct disciples of Ibn Rushd, most of whom were faithful and some of whom continued his work in philosophy and related sciences. Second, after Ibn Rushd's death, his works were hardly ignored by leading scholars in Andalusia and Morocco. Theologians, mathematicians, Sufis, historians, physicians, philosophers, and literary figures used Ibn Rushd's works extensively. Third, evidence has emerged that some of Ibn Rushd's books, mainly the Kashf and the Incoherence, was transmitted east to Egypt and the Levant and used by philosophers and scholars there. However, Ibn Rushd's philosophy is an even bigger influence within the corpus of Jewish philosophy, which quickly became a second home for his thought, even supplanting Aristotle himself as the paramount authority in philosophy and science. The first and critical event was Maimonides' acquisition of Ibn Rushd commentaries, perhaps around 1190. His subsequent praise of this work precipitated a 4th century fascination with Ibn Rushd among Jewish philosophers, especially focusing on his commentaries, but even extending to some of his religious treatises. Ibn Rushd's influence on Christian Europe from the early 13th century through the Renaissance was massive and has been extensively studied. Translations from Arabic into Latin began with Michael Scott around 1220, and by the middle of the century, most of the Aristotelian commentaries has been translated. Almost immediately after the work of translation began, his ideas grew in influence, and already by the 1230s, he is known as the commentator. To summarize, Ibn Rushd, or Averroes as he is known in the West, was an incredibly important thinker. He is one of the most significant philosophers in the Islamic world and one who has had a massive impact on European scholasticism and thus also generally on the intellectual tradition of the world and of Europe. Thank you for watching and obrigado.